Hey friends, how are you? It's Mr. McKinney here with Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston. Excited for our live show we do every single Wednesday here at the Heritage Society. Of course, today we're talking about Barrie Scardino Bradley is going to be joining us very shortly on the live show. Thank you so much for tuning in. What we always do is we make sure we thank folks who helped us in the past. You probably remember last week we had a wonderful tour of the mural that we have outside the Heritage Society by Minette Basel, our awesome board president. So thank you to Minette for joining us and for actually explaining a little bit more about the awesome mural that's out there. We got some really great feedback about that. And you can tour the mural, by the way, when you come here to visit us at the Heritage Society. It's out and about and open for everybody to do so. Okay. Allison Bell, let's welcome our Executive Director, Allison Bell, to join us on the show. Allison, come on out. There she is. All right. So once again, every single show we talk about the guest that won last week. So I want to thank the folks that are tuning in. This is us over here with Sandra Lord. Remember?
Mask hanging off.
Well, this is Sandra Lord, and she'll be on the show with us next week, October 14th. But what's neat is that this is actually upstairs in the San Felipe cottage.
In the attic. That's right. She wanted to go up there and check out the attic.
Absolutely. That was what she wanted to do. And there's a reason why. I'm going to let her explain that, by the way. Let her explain why we were up in the attic when we see her next week. How about that? Well, talk about this photo real quick.
Sure. So we realized just recently that there is a special Centennial Girl Scout badge honoring the suffrage movement that the Girl Scouts can get by coming and taking a private tour of our suffrage exhibit. So we already have had 3 troops. I've got one I need to call back. So we're excited to be able to take these Girl Scouts on a special tour with our wonderful co-creator, Ann Sloan. She educates them. She makes them ask questions. So we just launched that, and we're very excited about it.
Oh, that's wonderful. It was a very successful opportunity for the girls to learn about women's history here at the Heritage Society, which we do with our brand new exhibits. That's wonderful. Talk about women's history.
Sure.
An event coming up.
An event, a panel discussion on Thursday, October 16th at 6 p.m. So you can pull out your wine and watch it on your Zoom. It's going to be live Zoom. We've got our panelist, Mary Jane Mudd, who is the president of the League of Women Voters. And we've got Robin Paoli, who you may recall the Houston Women's March, all the women's marches across the United States caught on a couple of years ago. And so now there is an actual whole movement of the marchers here. And then this young lady, Aisha Pandit, started an innovative policy think tank. So it's really about educating women how to continue being activists in the community of all different walks, of all different areas.
I love Robin. Robin rented out the bus in 2018 for the midterm elections. Yeah, and we got on the cover of the New York Times on the front page above the fold because of Robin's efforts and, of course, the Houston Women's March that were involved with that process. So thank you, Robin. I'm sure out there watching. And
it's only $5, and you go on your Zoom link for non-members, and if you're a Heritage Society member, it's free.
Easy. There you go. Great time to be a member because you can get a chance to enjoy these free opportunities that are coming up, which we're going to talk about more of them, by the way. So this is the big exhibit you mentioned earlier.
Yes,
Houston women cast their ballots.
And it focuses on local Houston women. We've had a lot of feedback on it. There is a virtual tour, of course, but it's more fun to come in. You can socially distance. It's very open area, and we've had a lot of positive feedback. We had a couple of tours today.
Yeah, and we always offer this special opportunity. Tell people about it.
The virtual tour, if you're not comfortable coming out, it's only $5 again. You go online, you can see the entire tour, plus it comes with a 25-page booklet that explains, and it'll show you up close each panel.
It's a great tour, and you can read what's going on in the panels. That's how detailed it is. Lisa Carey helped put this together, and her team. She's on the committee to help make this exhibit happen.
Right.
And, of course, Ann Sloan and Betty Trapp Chapman are the wonderful co-curators for this opportunity. And it closes March 31st. Just make sure you go out and check it out, okay? All right, what else do we have?
It's our favorite time for prizes.
It's the best part, so here we go. Here are the prizes that are available. Again, if you stayed and watched Kimber Fountain's show, Kimber Fountain joined us, talked about the Galveston Seawall Chronicles, her big book that was out, her actually first book. There she is, Kimber Fountain. You should know the answer to these questions, and we have some great winners. So the very first question we asked was,
what was the shape of the original Galveston seawall?
Let me give you a little hint, by the way, too. So what's the answer?
What's the answer? Oh,
yeah, let us know who
the answer is the letter L.
There you go.
And our winner, do you have the winner, or can I announce the winner?
Announce
our
the winner.
Winner is Sandra Lord.
Oh my
is our
gosh.
special guest.
She was
must be
tuning
at
in and
home
she got it
watching.
right.
Yeah.
And when we do this later on, we're going to have our awesome author, Barrie Scardino Bradley, talk about 5 questions, by the way, at
Right.
the end of her talk. And those who get it right, when you do chime in, by the way, it's time-stamped on Facebook. So Sandra Lord
Yes.
was the first person to chime in, and she got it correct because she watched
Yeah,
the program.
that's
So,
right.
next
Okay.
question.
What hotel, still around today, was built to celebrate the completion of the Great Raising and the seawall itself?
Okay, what's the answer?
The answer is the Galvez.
And who got it right?
And one of our docents, Marcia Lutz, got
Marcia
it right.
Lutz, she's
Marcia
awesome.
Lutz
She's always
again.
watching in the show,
I
tuning in,
know.
and she got the question right. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, she deserves to
Thank
win.
you, Marcia, for
Thank you,
continuing to
Marcia.
watch.
Absolutely. Okay, the third question.
What is the name of the stretch of the seawall where men would drag race? And the hint is it's a fruit.
Okay.
And
What's the answer?
The answer is Cherry Hill. And the winner is Rose Sudbury Spradling.
Look at that. So, Rose, you get a prize. You're one of life's winners. Okay, here we go. Question number 4.
What is the name of the man who purchased the Balinese room at auction and converted it to the front of it and the iconic facade? And he has a famous relative. That's your hint.
That's right. Okay, so the famous relative, of course, is George Mitchell. Okay, who helped to save Galveston, the Strand area in the 1980s and late 70s. But the person who saved the Balinese room, who purchased it, what's his name?
Christy Mitchell.
Okay.
Christy Mitchell. And the person who got it right is Catherine Fitzgerald Shremick.
Gotcha. And I do believe that Kimber Fountain gave us a disclaimer. She mentioned that she actually got it incorrect. It was actually Johnny Mitchell is who I believe the answer was. But she said we're going to honor Christy Mitchell. Is that correct? Is that how it went out?
Maybe so.
Yes, I believe so. You can watch the video, but just letting you know that Kimber Fountain misspoke as she was so energetic, so passionate. So she did say that. Okay,
like
so
Christie's as in the restaurant.
yeah, I know that was what the answer I think was.
Wow.
So maybe it's the reverse, but nevertheless, just note that whoever won the answer is what the winners. Catherine. So Catherine is our winner for that. Okay, and that might be our mistake, but that's the winner. All right, here we go. Last question.
What was the first ever water-based entertainment venue of its kind in Texas? And the answer is Ciarama. And the winner, Marcia Lutz, again.
Oh, hey, I love that. Hey, she's tuning in. She's watching the show. We appreciate her. Well, once again, thank you to Allison Bell for joining us today, our Executive Director of the Heritage Society, and thanks for all the work that you do behind the scenes to make it happen. So thank you again. And we are getting close to introducing our guest. Here she is, by the way. So we are getting very close. We do want to thank, by the way, Kirksey Gregg Productions LLC for actually putting together and helping us make this studio possible. We're really excited to be able to produce this show live at the Heritage Society, and the Tea Room transformed into our studio makes it possible. So once again, thank you to Kirksey Gregg Productions LLC. He is on the board of the Heritage Society, one of our dedicated board members. Also, by the way, thank you once again to Kimber Fountain for joining us. She gave us a really great look at Galveston history through her book, The Seawall Chronicles. So we appreciate her for doing that. Next Wednesday, October 14th, we have with us on the show. It's a big day for us here at the live show because we have joining us Sandra Lord. She's going to be on the show. This is her first book and her latest edition. It's called, once again, Ghost of Houston's Market Square Park. So there it is. Do not miss out because she's going to be our speaker happening only in a week from today. So we're looking forward to that. I'll put this right over here just for now. And, you can join us live for free. So there you go. There's her book out right now. You can get a copy of that. And once again, October 14th, she'll be joining us on the live show. Okay, let's see. Also, by the way, Sandra Lord is going to be on the Houston Hour. I should definitely mention this because if you want to get a sneak peek of what you're going to hear, it's a 25-minute interview on the Houston Hour on 90.1 KPFT with my awesome special guest co-host, Paige Myrick. And that's, once again, Thursday, tomorrow at 3 o'clock on 90.1 KPFT. So you will hear Sandra Lord on the show happening once again tomorrow at 3 o'clock on 90.1 KPFT. Okay. And if you missed last week's show, Kimber Fountain or Christopher Varela, you can see all of these. They're all kept and logged and archived on our YouTube channel at the Heritage Society. Heritage Society, now, we only have 216 subscribers, and we need to get more subscribers. So go out there right now. If you have a Gmail account, you actually have a YouTube because they own each other. They bought them out, so you have a YouTube account. Like and follow and subscribe to our social media site known as YouTube because we want you to have access to these great videos. There's Michael Daly over there. He'll produce a couple of them. You've got videos videos on architecture here in Houston. You've got videos on history tours, African American experience, and of course the houses that we have here. And all of our live shows are logged in on our YouTube channel. So do not miss out. Make sure that you join us on YouTube, including watching this show, which does air, you'll see tomorrow morning is when it's available. Also, lastly, make sure you like and follow Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston and the Houston History Bus so you can join us on free tours that we have on board the bus. We'd love for you to join us on a free tour on Houston's only open-air bus. I also want to mention, by the way, we are doing our Haunted Houston tours, Mr. McKinney's Haunted Houston, so join us for a fun experience. It is COVID-friendly and safe because we have 50% capacity, and we ask you to wear a mask on board the bus. So you can get information by simply liking and following our social media sites. There you go. Costs you nothing. Now, here it is. We want to welcome to the show Barrie Scardino Bradley. Come on down, Barrie. Here we go. Let's get started. People are so looking forward to this talk. There she is. Let's do this.
Take my mask off.
Oh, sure, so we can hear you better. Why not? Well, welcome back to Houston.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, because you've spent a lot of time here. You've spent a lot of time documenting this city over the years, and it's such a pleasure to have you join us. Let people know where you're staying, by the way, because you've got a connection to that space, too.
Oh, I do. I'm staying at the Lancaster, and it is the new revised Lancaster. It's totally been redecorated. It was the original auditorium hotel, and my partner in preservation services, Manette Basil, and I got a Texas historical marker for the first iteration of the Lancaster. But staying there has been such a pleasure to see the new renovations. It's absolutely beautiful. The room is so comfortable. So thank you for arranging for that for me.
Oh, yeah, thank you to Tom Harwell and the whole team over at the Lancaster right there. Stay in the Lancaster because it's a bit of Houston history. As you heard, Barrie talk about the fact that, in 1983 when they renovated the old 1926 auditorium with Joseph Finger design. Really a special piece of Houston history. And I appreciate y'all putting on the National Registry because that's what we need, more and more of these treasures preserved for all of us to enjoy. That's kind of your story. It's what you've been doing for the last 40 years. It really
my
has.
whole life. I've only been in Houston for 40 years.
Oh, look at that. But look at this, by the way. Get a shot of this. This is what we're going to talk about today because it is your opportunity to be able to ask questions to Barrie about really all that you, and you know these iconic parts of Houston history in these books because every library in Houston should have these. And I love the fact that we're able to talk about them in detail with the author herself in studio. Let's see who's on board, by the way. You've got Marcia Lutz joining us. You've got Sandra Lord is actually chiming in. Eddie Schulman over with the River Oaks Tire. Our buddy Eddie over there. We love Eddie. Mary Melody Page is joining us too. So, just a lot of people have chimed in to be able to say hello. And this photo is great because this really kind of starts your journey when it comes to Houston preservation, when you kind of first got really excited about preservation.
No, that's my second thing.
Oh, that's right. It goes, and you're right. It goes, Houston, though, why? It's Houston, right?
No.
Because you go deep, though, when it comes to preservation because your family, we're going to talk about that as well, right?
Yeah, but this is myself as the architectural archivist at the Houston Metropolitan Research Center. But that was the second job I had in Houston.
Ah, okay.
Before that, I worked, there I am, preserving drawings, which is in many ways important, particularly these buildings that have been demolished. So we had I was the first architectural archivist for the city. And as you can see, the plastic bags in the back, they had tons of drawings. They had Finn's drawings. And many other architects had left things, and they were just all in plastic bags in the basement. So it was quite a challenge to get all that stuff organized and preserved so that people would have the original plans when they redid the buildings, including the golf building, by the way.
And you came on at the start of the HMRC. A couple of years after it was founded, it was organized. I think 1974, 1976. I should know the answer as the president of the Friends of Texas Room. But here we are. Then they hire you, and you really are the first person to really kind of have to digitize these things or really preserve them.
There's no such thing as
way before that. So here we are. So tell people what were your challenges working in this role as the very first person involved.
Well, we had to get the map cases and that's what we called them then. The kinds of places to put the drawings, but we had to order quite a bit of film. The really important things we encapsulated in film so that they could be handled because these papers, many of them were so fragile. But getting the storage situation, and we had, I learned all about the kinds of materials you needed when I got my degree, but, just finding sources. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, but it certainly has gone far beyond that now. in terms of the number of, in fact, Howard Barnstone's collection. That's the last book I think we'll talk about, but that's been an enormously helpful resource in researching Howard's career, was having all of that in the archive. Oh, here I am in Savannah.
So let's talk about this.
This is a plan of the city of Savannah. It was actually drawn in 1818. I grew up in Savannah in a family of historians and preservationists. My grandmother and her husband, I think it was her impetus, it was probably his money, but they bought the oldest house in Georgia and restored it. You had a picture, but you don't have it anymore. Anyway, so I grew up in a family. My mother was very involved with historic Savannah. I grew up as a little girl stuffing envelopes and doing that sort of thing. So I really was very aware of historic architecture as a child. My friends lived in historic buildings. I lived in one downtown. So it was kind of a natural for me to begin my interest in architecture, but I had no graphic skills. And so when I went to architecture school, I was in we called it the remedial architecture degree, because they gave an MA in architecture, not just an MArch. This was at UCLA in the 70s. And for people that wanted to be architectural writers, there were some people in my program that were interested in computer graphics before that phrase was ever invented. But it was for people that had no drawing ability. But then since then, I found out I could have been an architect anyway, because Howard Barnstone, Philip Johnson, there are a whole lot of architects that can't draw. But I don't have very good spatial sense either, so I'm a good critic. That's it. And that's because of my education, not because of anything innate. But anyway, I did grow up in Savannah, and I'm very proud of that. And it's a lovely city, and if you have a chance, it's absolutely chock full of historic buildings, if that's the kind of thing you care about. And they have been preserved. And I'd like to say something about Galveston. Sure. You were talking about it soon. Cities like Savannah and Galveston went on really hard times. Of course, there was a hurricane in Galveston in 1900. About the same time, Savannah just, lost their cotton business, lost so much that they really couldn't afford to tear anything down and build it. And the cities that have the great preserved buildings and housing stock today are the ones that couldn't afford to tear down anything and build anything new. However, Houston was not among them, and that's why Houston is an interesting study, because so much is in the record. So much has been
Oh, no, keep going.
He wants me to talk faster, I think. I can't talk as fast as he can.
No. I want to be more head on her.
I'm just saying one of the important things to know about Houston architecture, and one of the things that I really wanted to talk about in my latest book, Improbable Metropolis, it's these images and the drawings that have shown us what Houston really was like, because so much was torn down. I think finally we've gotten the people that live here and the powers that be to understand that historic buildings are important, and they tell a story, and they give a place a feeling of a place.
Absolutely, and we also can learn a lot from Savannah about heritage tourism, and Galveston as well. I mean, they use their historical districts and historical structure to tell a story about their city, but it also makes sense, and it makes dollars and cents, because now they have an attraction and they have their history, they can promote it. So we're kind of getting there, and of course with your work and awareness, and Manette's and other people, Guy Hagstead and folks that help to really preserve some of the buildings that are in Market Square. Just as an example, we're kind of there. We're not where we need to be, but we're going to talk more about that in a second. We'll talk about this house.
Oh, that's the house.
Oh, it is here.
You said you do have it.
Well, there it is.
No, that was the house. It was built in 1750, we think, about then. And I grew up pretty much going there all the time, and it was out in the country. It was, it was a plantation, I'm ashamed to say. There were slaves. There's a slave cemetery there that's been preserved, but it was called Wild Heron, and it was a rice plantation, as most of the plantations around Savannah were. I've forgotten what I was. This is my room right up there. Anyway, I was going to just show it and say, oh, this is where I grew up, so you would feel really sorry for me. But
and
it really was.
Speaking of
this is much better. That's me and Manette. For 8 years, we had a business. Oh, my goodness. You can't see us very clearly, but we were very young. But we had a preservation services, and we got I think the most important thing we did, I can't see Manette in the background for her to nod or not, she's here, but I think the most important thing we did was the Main Street Market Square Historic District nomination to the National Register. And I just learned last night that the new AIA Houston building that they bought several years ago and had it almost completely renovated, and then Hugo, right? What's Hugo?
Harvey.
Harvey, I knew
Yeah,
Hugo
yeah,
was
it's an
wrong.
H, it's an H.
It was an H. Anyway, but I learned last night that they were able to get a very large grant because of that designation, and it made me feel glad we had done that, Manette. And I'm sure a lot of other buildings have been able to take advantage of some of the tax advantages and other kinds of grants. Let's talk about my books. Speaking of being young.
Well, this kind of brings you back, and this takes you to, I guess we'll talk about your first book, and we want to do that real quick. So there it is. I want you to zoom in on that. This is, of course, Houston's Forgotten Heritage, and a landmark book when it comes to preservation in Houston, at least in my opinion. Talk about how it came to be.
Well, Dorothy Knox Houghton here, it was her idea, and she was trying to find somebody else. She had a lot of friends that had photographs of historic houses, interiors, gardens, and that sort of thing. And, the Metropolitan Research Center existed, but there really no great collection of historic buildings. And let's see. Well, here's some Victorian buildings.
These are remarkable homes that lined up and down, Fannin Street and Main Street, and they're just Smith Street. All we have now left is the Kirby Mansion, and the Duff House, the Duff Mansion, which was moved.
I just rode by that.
But that's all we have left. It's really, really sad.
Well, this is Catherine Howe, who was at the Museum of Fine Arts, and she did the chapter on interior. Sadie Gwynn Blackburn, who was a very well-known gardener and garden enthusiast and writer, wrote the chapter on gardens, and then that's me. You wouldn't recognize me. I was so much younger. But the four of us worked together for a couple of years. We got funding from the Junior League of Houston to do the book, and it has been reprinted, the new editions. It's in paperback. The new paperback has a blue cover, but it was a lot of fun, and actually it was Stephen Fox that introduced me to Dorothy Knox.
There's your favorite
Oh,
cover.
the blue I don't like any of them, but that one's better than the other one, don't you think?
Yeah, you got the Masterson House. There it is. Look at that.
Yeah, it's gone. And I would like to just say one more thing about that book, because you said that it was about preservation. Yeah, that's Dorothy.
It's about awareness. I mean, it gets people to
It's about
realize.
awareness, because almost everything in this book has been torn down.
Yeah, and that was the idea, was to show people
Right.
kind of how great Houston used to be with their architecture and their, and it's mostly obviously residential, but that was a pivotal book because it got people talking, got the conversation talking, and, we see ups and downs with the nation and people around different cities, preserving buildings, but I think that really got the conversation going in an important way, and it was a landmark book in my opinion. Here's some more photos from the book itself.
Yeah, that's
this
the
is a
Nash
modern
house.
photo of the Nash House over there in Westmoreland. You can see right there at 215 Westmoreland, so that's a beautiful home. And then we've got more houses too. Cortland Place.
Cortland Place, yeah. Well, this was just to give you an idea of and then this was the next book. And I can tell you how I was still working at Rice.
So you have such great success with the first one, and it was success because that book, I think, just took off.
Yeah.
And in fact, right now, it's, and thank goodness it's a second printing or a third printing of it, however many printings there are of it now.
Oh, there are lots of printings. There are 3 editions where we actually had an opportunity to correct things and add things.
And I think a fun story with the book that we talked about, Houston's Forgotten Heritage, was that originally there wasn't a lot of information on some of the architects, but you've got a fun story. You talked about,
George Dickey.
Yeah.
He was one of the best Victorian era architects in Houston, and we didn't really know very much we knew a lot about him while he was doing buildings here. We knew the buildings that he did because he would put advertisements in the city directories and the newspapers listing all his buildings, so that was pretty easy to find out. But he just disappeared, and we had no idea where he'd gone. So in the first edition, we just say he was great, and he did all these fabulous buildings, and he disappeared. Well, one of his relatives somehow got a hold of the book and wrote us and told us all the information about what happened. He went to San Francisco to work on some of the rebuilding after the 1901, was it 01 or 02, earthquake, 01 I think. And then he went to New Orleans, and he and one of his sons continued to practice architecture there. So as a result of publishing this kind of information, you get more information, and that's true of all these books and of any newspaper articles or anything like that. I think one of the great advantages is that you not only bring awareness, but you bring more information in by getting things out there.
Now, you mentioned Victorian architects. One of the ones that's your favorite, someone that you also kind of fell in love with, in fact, so much so you dedicate your second book to that individual. Talk about
Clayton.
Clayton, okay?
Well,
Nicholas
it's
J.
not
Clayton.
dedicated to him.
It's
is him.
Yeah, check this out. This is your second book.
Well, and that came about. Drexel Turner discovered that all of the architects, well, I should tell you something about him. He and his mother immigrated from Ireland when he was a little boy to the United States during the potato famine. His father had died, and it was terrible, but she obviously was a very bright person, and he ended up growing up and getting what amounted to professional architectural training, which most people, on the East Coast, which most people didn't have. He ended up here in in Galveston, and he actually was sort of an architect for the Roman Catholic Church across the Southeast, and he really began his career, and one of the great things that still stands in Houston is the Annunciation Church, which he kind of saved from falling down. So what you see today, even though he built on the original church, is really his work. But Clayton's drawings were all in Galveston at the Rosenberg Library, which, that's Heiner. Let's see. I don't know if I can flipped any drawings.
Well, what's great about these books is that you've just got some photos that are rare, and that, unless you want to fish through hours and hours of archives, they're right here in this book for you, and that's what's so great about these books.
Well, and it leads you to other, all of these books are very well documented, lots of footnotes, which bothers some people, but it's really important to me.
People love those books. That
I always read footnotes.
The story,
But Clayton ended up doing the first important house in Houston. Let's see, what have we got here?
The Christian House?
That's in Galveston. That was known as the Bishop's Palace. That was, and I think people do know that house, but these are the drawings that we found. I wanted to mention that Drexel Turner was actually the person who discovered these archives, and this book was his idea. And he worked on it for a long time, but then he just had too many responsibilities at Rice and other things. So I ended up really putting together a lot of work. Stephen Fox had done a lot of work on this. So even though Stephen's name's not on it, a lot of his soul is in it, and certainly his knowledge. But these are pictures of the Gresham House that are in the book. Mr. McKinney asked me just to give him some slides of some of the photographs and drawings and things that were in the book. So that's what we've got here, so we don't have to hold them up.
Now, you wrote for Sight Magazine. You made Sight Magazine, a thing. I mean, you worked...
No, I didn't make it a thing. I was on the original editorial board, and I was the editor eventually of the whole magazine. So I was, it was a huge part of my life for a long time.
So much so that, a natural book would come to about. And there it is, by the way. Talk about this book.
Well, Bill Stern and Bruce Webb were also on the original. Bill was an architect, and unfortunately he died a few years ago. Bruce is a professor emeritus in architecture at the University of Houston. No. And it was their idea to do a book, and they wanted to call it Best of Sight, and they just wanted to pick their favorite articles. And I said, nobody's going to publish that. That's crazy. So I went to the University of Texas, and we got a great, you're just showing pictures.
Just let people see how great the book is.
We got a great editor there, and who sort of guided the book, and it was very focused on Houston, which I think we couldn't have gotten it published if it hadn't been. Sight is a great magazine, and it does focus on Houston, but we certainly have had articles across the board on other places in the United States. So this book turned out to be a lot of fun. The three of us picked the articles, and then we divided it divided the book into three sections. One was on architecture, one was on places, and I can't remember what was the other one. Let's see, it's in
that formula will work out for you, and we'll get into that a little bit later on.
Well, it's good, anybody.
You love to collaborate.
Right.
You're really great about that, bringing folks together that have, common goals. And I guess the very first book that you did, same concept.
Right.
This collaboration aspect, and not many books are done that way, but the ones that you did are just amazing.
Idea of the city, places of the city, and then architecture, I think, was the last one that... Yeah, and each one of us took one section, and we were able to choose the articles. And I edited the whole thing. I actually kind of took over and did that and worked with the press, but edited everybody's articles, but we had to get permission to republish them. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and it's been a good book. It's we had a huge fight about the Astrodome going on the cover, and now, Manette, we are so thrilled because it's giving even more... publicity and
Yeah.
attention to everybody's effort. I'm sure everybody out there listening wants to save the Astrodome.
You know,
it's
the
really
world's largest air-conditioned room, and an engineering marvel, an engineering feat.
well,
No
it's
wonder
if Houston has, I mean, we don't have the Eiffel Tower, but we have the
Absolutely.
Astrodome. I mean, most cities.
and it's a testament to our can-do spirit that
Yeah.
Was in the 19. And
Can I just tell a story
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
thought of?
Please do.
Well, my granddaughter, when she was about 3 or 4, was in Mercy School, and they were teaching her about the Eiffel Tower. This reminded me, and different cities had different important buildings or different. We were lying in bed. I was rubbing her back, trying to get her to go to sleep one night, and she knew I lived in Houston. They lived in Savannah, and she said, Paris has the Eiffel Tower, and St. Louis has an arch. And she went on and said a few other things they'd made her learn in school. And then she remembered I was from Houston. She said, and Houston has 2 targets. She didn't know, but now she knows we have the Astrodome. She's grown up. But so we've got to get that out there, and we've got to save the Astrodome so that little girls will know to tell their grandmothers that Houston has the Astrodome.
Well, we will. And there's an
Thank
Astrodome
you.
Conservancy that's actually run by Manette and
Yes.
by Beth Jackson and folks like that, Phoebe Tudor, all these amazing ladies that have come together, and a great board of directors.
Well, they're men too.
There are some men involved. Yes, there are. But it's the can-do spirit, and I love the idea of them working at trying to find a new way to repurpose.
So
the
it turns
Astrodome.
out this was a great cover photograph
Yes,
for that
I think
book.
so too. And
Let's talk about Herman Park.
well, let's actually first talk about you having fun because you have
Oh,
lots
we've got
of fun.
pictures.
Well, but
Oh.
you've got fun.
I've done some books that are not exactly
Yeah,
my
talk
Houston.
about that.
Well, this actually is sold incredibly well. It's almost as well as Houston's Forgotten Heritage. Susan Mason is a caterer in Savannah and a longtime good friend of mine, and she had all these recipes, and she didn't know what to do with them. She didn't know how to write, and I even wrote her a little statement. So we got together and put this together, and did you all know that firehouses are great cookbook collectors? I didn't know that.
Well, it makes sense. They're
They
cooking
cook all the
day.
time.
Yeah.
But all the firemen in New York, this got to be sort of a, whatever you call it, a book that was just circulating
love
through.
that.
They bought, the firemen in New York had Susan up there several times. Anyway, we're working on a second one. It's called, oh God, I've forgotten the name of it.
So
You'll
what's
have
this
to-
recipe for?
Oh, this is my
Little feta,
favorite
little
salad.
watermelon.
I've made it. It's watermelon, pine nuts, I think lettuce, arugula, and feta cheese.
Looks
And just
delicious.
some lemon dressing, and it is. Her recipes are all very simple.
And there she
there's
is.
Susan, and there's
Yay.
Savannah, and you can go through them a little
Yeah.
faster, but now,
It's the only one. Yeah.
yeah.
So you had fun with that book.
Yeah,
Let's
I've
talk
had some
about
fun doing some other things.
another book.
Now, this was serious.
1914, Houston gets a gift. It gets a gift in the way of George Herman's amazing contribution known as Herman Park. Okay, and let's talk about Herman Park because when the centennial comes up, obviously they
This
want to
was
have
done
a
for
way
the
to
centennial,
document this amazing park and this wonderful gift. So talk about your book about Herman Park.
Well, Jay Baker, I had been on the board of Herman Park, and then while I was on the executive committee, we actually moved to New York City. So, but Jay continued, and he's a good friend, and it was his idea when I moved back to Houston, they were getting ready to try to find an author, and he actually asked me if I would do the book, and I, of course, said yes. I was thrilled. And so we got that done and put together, and it was a lot of fun, and Herman Park is just one of the special places in the city. We have some great newer parks. Of course, Memorial Park is another huge park. But this was really the first one. Now, this is Sam Houston Park,
Yes,
where we're sitting
right
now.
Yeah,
And
1890.
I go back to the whole history of parks in Houston and then some of the history of
That's
some
good
of
for
the people
context,
that,
give
yeah,
people an
I did
idea.
that. So this is what Sam Houston Park, apparently the prisoners in the jails were brought out to dig out these, I don't know, and this was a little ravine. Is that ravine still, Allison, is it still run through? I think it does.
No, it doesn't anymore. There's a little pond instead, but
Yeah.
but that is a photo of Sam Houston Park, which is Houston's oldest municipal park, which we're very proud to have it here. Just celebrated 120 years a few years back, here at the Heritage Society. So you'll get a chance to check that out. But when George Herman, announced this, I mean, it was a big gift. This amount of acreage here in Houston, and this is a photo from, I guess, the old Auditorium Hotel.
Yeah.
City Auditorium, the actual City Auditorium building.
Yes,
where
not
it
the
took place,
hotel.
not
It's
the
across the street. This is George Herman. He was very reclusive, but he was dying. and he knew that. And
Pancreatic cancer.
yeah, and Comey did the first plan for Houston, and he obviously had spoken because in the book, I don't know if I have the Comey plan or not, it was the first really planning document Houston ever had, and it was very important. But one of the things it's said, I don't know where it is.
Yeah,
I
the
can't
City
do
Beautiful movement, the idea of park space
Exactly.
was a really important feature.
So anyway, he gave the land that Comey had actually, and it had been a sawmill and a forest that belonged to Herman's family, and so that's what had been in that area. It was way outside of Houston, of course.
Which also encompasses originally, I think, portions of the Texas Medical Center.
Oh, the whole thing.
It was all the way south, and then the city had to end up buying that from the park and
Well, it was,
work on that.
yeah. I mean, some of us still are sad about that, but I guess the medical center, it is what it is, as our president says. But they had to have an election, and only 300 people voted or something. It was ridiculous to sell the park property for the medical center. But keep going.
And now, and then the park, of course, recently had, and I say recently, but it had a renovation on it. And so we now have this beautiful feature here, the McGovern Centennial Gardens. And I think most Houstonians have seen this. If you're tuning in from outside of Houston, that this is definitely a space you want to go visit when you come to our city.
This wasn't even finished when I wrote the book. I have a drawing of it because the book came out for the Centennial too, but it is pretty special.
Now, we don't have a copy of this book, but I wanted you to talk about this because it's just an example of when you're good at what you do and people want to capture their story, especially from a corporate level. This is an important family here in Houston that still has a connection and ties. Talk about your Fair Winds book and the history of the Kirby Corporation.
Well, John Henry Kirby, Houstonians know of Kirby Drive and Kirby Theater and Kirby everything else. That all, in fact, Kirby Drive was renamed. Yeah. We have some Kirby. Anyway, Kirbyville, Texas. He was a lumberman first, and his story and the story of his family is fascinating. And the Kirby Corporation approached me. They interviewed several people, and I'd never done a corporate history, and I didn't think I wanted to, but I was so taken in by the people that ran it, the people that interviewed me. I mean, they were just real human beings, and they cared about the history. And I said, I don't want to write a compilation of annual reports. I don't like numbers, and I don't really want to do that. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd really like to spend a lot of time talking about the history of the Kirby family and the history of, lumbering and around the Houston area in East Texas where he started. And they said, great. And they ended up hiring me, and they told me I could do whatever I wanted, which was great. They even let me name it Fairway. Here he is in his office in Houston on Main Street. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, and I got rides up and down the Kirby Corporation today. They started in lumber. They went to oil, made a lot of money in that, and then they bought their own barges and towboats to move the oil to the refineries because they were paying too much renting boats. And then they found out, they started leasing the boats to other corporations, to other oil companies, and then they found out they were making so much more money on the boats, they completely divested themselves of all the oil wells, particularly in Venezuela, interesting enough today with what's going on. So now what
office is it? Because I know at one point he officed in actually...
this is not the Kirby building. This is the Commerce building.
The Commerce building.
I mean, not Commerce, National Bank of Commerce, the little one on the corner that looks like that.
Yeah, that's where he was at. I've got that 1910 photo we showed you yesterday. We did a tour on board the bus.
Oh, it was so great.
With Stephen Fox and with Rusty at the
Avenue,
and all these
and
folks.
Manette.
And Manette Basil, and we passed by Main and Franklin, we passed by several of them, including where he had his office right there in the old 1905 and later 1909 First National Bank building. So there it is, lots of fun.
Anyway, so this book is not generally available, but it kind of goes through the oil. And then, I didn't think I finished my sentence. They ended up divesting the oil and investing all their money into transportation, and this shows inland transport. It's the largest inland transportation, including to Hawaii, and they used to inland transportation company in the country. It's huge. But then they also go up to Savannah. They go up the East Coast too. I don't know why that's not on this map. Maybe it was older. They donated the barge and the boat to move.
The shuttle.
Which one was it called?
Well,
Enterprise.
It's a replica.
Yeah, it's a replica.
Yeah.
But it was in Florida. It was in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center, and they didn't want it anymore, so they brought it to Houston. So Kirby the Ross Sea. You can see the Kirby insignia. And I love driving over the bridges because you can always see Kirby boats and barges.
Oh, that's
so
great.
I learned so much, and it was just really fun. It was so much different.
I just like that the family is still in operation and the legacy is still continuing.
Well, the family doesn't own it anymore.
True, and we know that John Henry Kirby actually lost a lot of his money during the Great Depression, so you think he's out and he's gone, but it's just nice to see the name someplace still around.
Well, it was a nice opportunity to talk about, because it really was a story of a lot of Houstonians. They started in lumber, they found oil on their lumberland, I mean, all over Texas, not just Houston, and then, have gone on to invest. So these stories are really larger than the individual building or the individual person. But that was a lot of fun.
Now, someone larger than life left a great impact on Houston. This book is your newest book. It's one of your newest books. We're going to talk about both of them just very briefly. But this one over here, I know that you are a huge fan of Howard Barnstone.
I am.
But talk a little bit about this book over here. Once again, it's Making Houston Modern. Okay, the life.
Show this, not that.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, you can look at this. It's okay. But there it is, right there. Talk a little bit about your book.
Well, again, this was a project that I had been. Oh, leave that there. I borrowed these books from Stephen because I forgot to bring mine. Anyway, what are we talking about here? There were a group of people. I was living in New York, and a group of people that kind of kept thinking they wanted to do a book on Barnstone because his work is pretty amazing, and he also was the associate architect with Philip Johnson on projects including the University of St. Thomas. That was at the beginning of his career, and of course his best-known building is the Rothko Chapel on the front of this building, for which he's given credit and for which he had nothing to do. His whole life, well, he says that. Gene Aubry, his partner at the time, really picked up the ball. He was asked to design it after Philip Johnson withdrew or was fired. I'm not sure. I think he withdrew, but had a lot of problems with the university. And now we've moved on to the Barnstone houses. He was very Miesian. His houses had a lot of glass, flat tops, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And this is the Owsley house, and it's looking at this is a book of essays by several different people. There's Howard, and there's his wife Gertrude, who was an actress.
Actress and an artist.
And then she became an artist later. Yeah, she's really quite a creative person, as was Howard. And there's a lot in the book. Notice the book says the life and architecture. There's a lot of information in there. He was a manic depressive.
The book too, right? You've got some folks that are involved with the family that helped to.
Oh yeah. So they were very cooperative and gave us pictures of Howard when he was little and that sort of thing and information. We also have an extensive catalog of all his work, and we were able to do that because of the leave it open at the catalog for a minute. We were able to do that because he donated all of his papers. He committed suicide in 1987. And since then, this group of people had been wanting to do the book and just couldn't get it started. So we finally had a meeting with me and Bruce Webb and Stephen and Bill Stern. And it was this book was Michelangelo Sabatino, who was also one of the authors. He's in Chicago now, and he wrote the chapter on Howard's Miesian work. Oh, another book.
Well, and you can get a copy of this book at Brazos Books, and it's all on Amazon. I mean, everywhere. So do yourself a favor and get a copy of the book Making Houston Modern, which again talks about the legacy of Howard Barnstone.
Well, and it's about his architecture and sort of what Houston was like during the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s, and sort of in the lives of the bon vivant who lived here and the intellectual class who built these fabulous houses and kind of parties they gave, and it has a good bit about the Museum of Fine Arts and that sort of thing. So, and his involvement, and also his personal relationships. Howard and Gertrude got divorced, but there's a chapter at the end by Olive Hershey, a well-known novelist. She's doing a book on Gertrude. And Gertrude just died last year.
Yeah.
It was very sad, but she had been meeting with her for years, so she's got all the material. But she wrote a book on their relationship and on Gertrude. I mean, the chapter is the last one. So that's pretty interesting. And
the best for last. Here we go.
Yeah.
Your newest a tribute to Houston's architectural history and paying tribute, The Improbable Metropolis. Talk about your latest book.
Well, first of all, I didn't name it that, and I can't even say it. Improbable Metropolis. It's a mouthful. But anyway, the press was wonderful. Both of these last two books were the University of Texas Press, and This is a beautiful picture, but what I wanted to show you was this one goes back to the founding of Houston. Well, I probably missed. Sorry. Do you have any other books? Well, I was going to show you these maps.
We can show them here. Let's see. That's what we have on screen.
Yeah, what do you have? Oh, first of all, the chapters, they're 8 chapters. I can't even remember. And they're all named after different monikers or nicknames or whatever you call it. And Bayou City was the first, and it really has been the most lasting kind of nickname of Houston. And the designer, I think, did a beautiful job with these cutouts for the chapters. So the first chapter is the second chapter is what the next slide represents, which really was not progressive. Well, that is progressive.
Yeah, the 1904 building.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the Carnegie Library, of course. This is the first real library that we had here in Houston. Andrew Carnegie was very kind and be able to sprinkle his money all around the nation to build library buildings specifically, but it was our job to produce the books and to do the money to manage the building. So that was a wonderful gift, and that was on McKinney and Travis Street, which is sadly no longer there. There's a parking garage there. And then we'd later get the Julie Addison Library in 1926. So, and some of the other photos that we had. The next one is, of course, this one, which is flashing a lot forward. So you probably want to talk more about what's.
Well, wait. Is that the next slide?
That's the next slide.
Well, let's just go on. We don't
Sure.
have forever. We've got to go watch the debate, everybody. Guess what this is? This is another fabulous. This is the most expensive picture in the book. I'm very proud of it. I want to show it everywhere I can because it cost me $500 to use it.
Oh, my gosh.
It was the only picture I could find. It's, of course, the baseball configuration. It could be reconfigured for football, but this was for the S. But it's such a gorgeous view of really how that building looked with the skylights before they were all covered over. Anyway, I love the picture. I love the Astrodome. So
who doesn't
join
love
the Astrodome Conservancy and send them money.
Right.
Let's see the next picture that I have in here. Oh, and there's also a good deal of discussion about buildings that were proposed for Houston that were never built.
And this gets a lot of people's attention, too.
You can see that Pennzoil and Texas Commerce, you can see recognizable buildings, and this was going to be right in the big middle of them all and be the tallest building in Houston. It was never built. It's still a parking lot.
Look at that. Now, of course, and that was, and there was a competition, actually, to get that built. So that was kind of an interesting scenario. And, yeah, it's still just a parking lot now. You know, nothing has been built there ever since. And, of course, we have a lot of other additions to our skyline. You've got the Tenneco building peeking out over there and 1100 Milam. So more architecture.
Yeah, this is, and now I can't remember, it's called BAPS, and I can't say what that stands for. But these temples, we have, of course, Houston started with, very late, by the way, building Protestant and one Catholic church, and then eventually had a synagogue. Today,
let people know where this is, by the way.
They do?
Yeah. Oh, I said let people know.
Let them know. I don't know. I can't remember. That's why I write, because I can't remember things. One thing that I do in this book is really, Houston is today the most diverse city in the country. And we have the religious structures that have been built in the last 20 years are incredible. And really some of the most beautiful. There are lots of pictures of this in the book. But it is I'm so sorry. I've got to find it and read it to you. I can't remember the name of it. Oh, here it is. What does that say? Can anybody read it? I could put my glasses on. It says BAPS Series something Mandir. Well, as you can see, some other pictures of it. And I do go into quite some detail about some of these other kinds of religious structures in Houston. This book began, that's that. Let's see what the next slide is. It began, oh my gosh!
The last slide we have here is your partner in crime, your buddy, for the last 40 plus years. There is Minette Basil, our board president at the Heritage Society. We mentioned her name earlier, of course, and they're working together. You're autographing all these books. So these books are available. You can purchase The Improbable Metropolis, which, again, the funds go to help the Heritage Society out. There'll be information on our website, or you can always email our executive director, Allison Bell, at abell@heritagesociety.org.
The reason to buy these from the Heritage Society is that I sign them all. And,
Exactly.
Having an author's signature does sometimes make books a little more valuable. So,
yeah.
and you won't pay any extra for them. It's a regular price, but
and you're not in Houston anymore, and you're not even going to be in Texas probably. So get it while it's hot and get an autographed signature, because obviously because of COVID scenarios, you had lots of book signings lined up, you had lots of lectures lined up, lots of press lined up, and we just couldn't make it happen. So your opportunity to get a book signed by the awesome author right now, Barrie Scardino Bradley, signed and delivered to you. We'll get it to you some way, somehow, but more importantly,
you can drive in the parking lot and pick it up.
Heritage Society is the most important thing to support them.
I'm going to be doing a program on this book on October 22nd, sponsored by the Heritage Society. It'll be kind of a Zoom program in which you'll have a chance I'll go much more in depth about this book and kind of the things that are in it that I think is significant to Houston's history. Well, I think everything in it is significant. It was, when I first gave it to them, it was twice as big and had 800 pictures, and they said, we can't publish this. And I said, oh, okay. Anyway, it's the best of the best, and so I hope you'll enjoy reading it and looking at it, and please get yourselves a copy and listen to the program. It's at 6 o'clock. I think that one's at 6.
Yes, 6 o'clock.
At 6, and it's also being sponsored by AIA Houston, the Historic Resources Committee. So, and thanks to Paul Homeyer for pushing that through. And you can go to aiahouston.org or theheritagesociety.org to sign up for that program.
Yeah, and education hours too are available for that as well, I believe. So it's kind of a partnership. That's what I heard, at least. Yes. So there you go. You architects out there that need to get credit.
Oh yeah, you can get CEUs for that.
Yeah,
I'm so
CEUs.
sorry, I forgot.
That's critical. And of course, you spent some time, managing that organization right there, the nonprofit focused on really promoting architecture here in Houston and all throughout for the industry. So just thank you so much for the work that you've done when you're in that role, and do not miss out on your opportunity to learn about Houston in a very unique way by the author herself. I've got a couple questions for you before we ask the actual bonus questions. One of which is, we went on the tour last night, for example. What is something that you miss from Houston? You come on the show, you come to Houston, what, 1979? It was, yeah. So here you are in Houston 79. There's a lot that's gone from Houston from 79 to present day. What's missing?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me what was
from
missing not living here.
Well, I'm going to get that too. I'm going to get that also. But what is something that's missing from Houston's architectural address book that's no longer there? One building that you could have saved, maybe would have saved, or at least are just miss.
Warrens.
Oh yeah.
What?
The Alan Paul Witch's Hat house.
Oh, the Witch's Hat house. I couldn't hear what she was saying. I'm getting prompted from
that's
all
a residential
my
house.
people. Yeah, it had the Witch's Hat that went, and I've just found out it's in a park. It's been bought. It was in a resale architectural antique store for a long time. But what I do miss about Houston is such a vibrant, exciting, alive place, and I think anything is possible here except saving the war. No, but we're doing a much better job, and so join with us. We're running short of time.
Yeah, you're right. We are. So let's make sure we ask those questions. We're going to ask 5 questions from the talk today. Okay, so 5. They have to be from what we talked about.
Do I have to make them up?
Well, we're going to make them together. We're going to ask them. Technically, you're supposed to, so we're going to let you do it, but I'll be happy to chime in and help out, or at least play ref to make sure that it was something that we talked about today on the live show. So let's ask our very first question. It's a test question, and they're going to answer it live on Facebook. So you can ask a question now about your first book, and then we'll kind of make our way into. Okay. Or let's talk. The first one should be about you. About you. So where? How about this? Maybe talk about when you first came to Houston, something we talked about earlier. Maybe the role that you had. Maybe that's a good test question.
I don't think I said. What was my second job in Houston?
Okay.
Because I said that.
And that's the one that connects with, the photo that we showed earlier, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what was Barrie Scardino Bradley's second job here in Houston?
I never said what my first job was. It was at Rice, but go ahead.
Okay, there you go. So the first one was at Rice, so it's not that answered. But the second job that she had here in Houston, circa 1979, working to save and preserve Houston's past. We showed a photo earlier. What was her role? Her job title / role, and we'll accept those answers. Are people chiming in now? Chime in with those questions. Sandra Lord gave us a little heart. Sandra Lord remembers the Witch's Hat house. She said that over there. Wonderful. That's our first question, okay? Second question, maybe about your first book. Houston's Forgotten Heritage. Maybe ask a question about that we talked about.
Gosh, I can think of so many questions, but now I have to try. You didn't know I was going to do this. First book. Have you got any ideas, anybody? Yes. Who funded the first book, Houston's Forgotten Heritage?
Okay, so
it's
that
a
is
nonprofit organization in Houston.
Okay, that's a very important. So the question is, our second question is, what organization funded the book? It's a great organization. You heard her mention it twice. It actually connected with some of the people that were involved in the book. They all had a connection with this. So what organization was the one that helped to fund the very first book, Houston's Forgotten Heritage?
And all of the royalties were donated to this organization.
Wonderful way to give back. How about that? Now our third question for tonight.
On the third book, what was it?
Well,
Okay.
it can be about anything. A third question.
What is on the cover of the book entitled Ephemeral City?
Ooh, what Houston landmark is on the cover? Okay, there's a couple things on the cover itself, but there is a landmark that you told us a really fun story, a personal story about. What landmark is on the cover of that book? Okay, that is our third question. Now our fourth question for tonight, and are people chiming in? Please chime in, guys. I got something. Okay, Marsha's chiming in. Peter Basil chimed in too. Okay, keep chiming in, guys.
Okay, let's do one about Herman Park. What year did George Herman give the land for Herman Park?
Great question. That's a good question. What year did George Herman donate the land for the park? Okay, we mentioned the centennial celebration that was recent, so these are good questions. A little hint right there. So you should know the answer if you watched the video earlier. If not, you might know the answer, but there it is. Okay, fifth and final question.
Okay, let's make this about Barnstone.
Oh, yeah.
Let me think. What is his most famous building that he had nothing to do with?
There you go. That's a great question. Great, and you can go to the cover of the book for that answer. So the question is, what is
the building in Houston for which Barnstone and Aubrey is best known for?
That he had nothing
to do with it.
Love that. Okay, so there you go. Those 5 questions. Folks are chiming in now. Jim Wagner's chiming in. Sandra Lord, of course, is chiming in. Marcia, Peter, all these folks are chiming in. Thank you so much for doing that. We appreciate you being interactive and being involved. So that is a great question, and those are our 5 questions. And then lastly, let's see what else we have over here. Thank you again to Barrie Scardino Bradley. You can go to barriescardinobradley.com for more information about the author. And we really do appreciate you, being here and being able to join us on the live show. And you can get a copy just like that of your autographed book, so don't miss out and support the Heritage Society. And of course, lastly, thank you to you, the folks, the viewers out there watching the show. We appreciate you watching every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock. We mentioned earlier Sandra Lord's going to be joining us about her newest book, The Ghosts of Houston's Market Square Park. Do not miss out on that. And then, of course, thank you to Alana, to Isaac, to Kian, to Harrison. And then, of course, thank you to Allison Ayers-Bell and, of course, Minette Basil, our board president. Okay? Good night. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Good night.